A comment by the Chief Justice of India, an insect, a social media storm, an outpouring of support, a quasi-political movement, and a crackdown. All this in a span of just a few days. We live in strange times, but nothing could have prepared me for what we saw go down with the Cockroach Janta Party or the CJP. What started off as a meme suddenly became much more than that. It took the pesky cockroach and turned it into a symbol of resilience and dissent. If you too are chronically online, visuals of a suited up cockroach must have flooded your timeline lately. Or even others just putting up "Main bhi cockroach" posts showing their support for the CJP, which by the way isn't a real party. Yet. But why does this matter? Well, the youth is becoming an increasingly important vote bank for political parties in the country, and a vote bank that the BJP has seen support from. As per reports, in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, 21% of young voters supported the Congress, while 39% voted for the BJP and nearly 7% for BJP allies. Together, the NDA stood at 46% vote share amongst the youth. So how did the CJP come into existence? Is it AAP Light? Who is Abhijit Dipke? Why did the government come down heavily on the CJP? Is there really disillusionment with the government? Is this the start of something larger? Will people take to the streets, or will this remain a chronically online movement? How will AI impact political discourse? Is India's gerontocracy not resonating with young voters? We'll bring you the answers to all of this and more. It's Tuesday, May 26th. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you are listening to The Morning Brief from The Economic Times. It all started on May 15th when the CJI said this.
There are already parasites in society who attack you people, you attack the system, and you want to join hands with them. There are youngsters like cockroaches, they don't get any employment, they don't have any place in profession. Some of them become media, some of them become social media, some of them become RTI activists, some have become another activists, and they start attacking everyone. And you people file contempt petition because I go to you, not taking up the matter.
What followed was a swarm of "Main bhi cockroach" trends online. And while the CJI went on to clarify that he was referring to young professionals with fake degrees, it did not contain the social media storm. On May 16th, the Cockroach Janta Party was founded by Abhijit Dipke, a Boston University graduate and political strategist who's worked with the Aam Aadmi Party in the past. The opposition swiftly saw the impact that the CJP was having, and many senior leaders like Mahua Moitra and Kirti Azad expressed their support. And of course, all of your known voices of dissent from Dhruv Rathi to Kunal Kamra to Arundhati Roy joined in, or cashed in, depending on which side of the political debate you're on. The CJP gained more than 20 million online followers and surpassed the BJP's Instagram followers in just a few days. Accusations of Pakistani patronage and participation followed. Dipke, though, clarified with screen grabs that 94% of the account's followers were Indians. Nevertheless, Dipke later shared that the government had taken down their website and even their official X page, which was inaccessible in the country. As of today, the website is accessible in India. If the CJP is a political movement, what are its demands? Primarily 5. No Rajya Sabha seats for retired CGIs, UAPA for vote deletion, 50% women's reservation in parliament, cancellation of licenses for corporate media houses, and a 20-year ban on political defectors. So how did all of this end up happening, and what makes the CJP unique in the political landscape? We ask Sudhanshu Kaushik, President and CEO of the Centre for Youth Policy and author of The Future is Ours, The Political Promise of India's Youth. Thank you so much, Sudhanshu, for joining us on the morning brief. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to speak about young people in India.
Absolutely. So, very interesting times, Sudhanshu. I mean, what started off as a joke has just snowballed into something much bigger and essentially sort of taken a life of its own, right? I wanted to ask you what your first thoughts were when you saw that meme circulating about the Cockroach Janta party.
That was it. You laugh. You think it's a funny joke. And, sometimes we need the humor, especially in times like these. It's good to have a good laugh. That's obviously political satire and enjoy the memes, the little memories you create, the conversations, as long as or especially if you're able to, create awareness through political satire. I think you're really doing that well.
But did you expect it to sort of snowball the way it did?
So this is really interesting. What exactly are is it expected to snowball? So to be fair, you heard about the Cockroach Janta Party right after the entire controversy, right? And then you see the kind of movement and then the evolution into the Cockroach Janta Party as we're talking about it, which is still political satire, right? Look, everyone's online. Everyone has access to AI tools. And to be honest, if right now in 2026, if people are vibe coding $100 million companies, why can't we be vibe coding political parties?
Right. But the interesting thing here is, Sudhanshu, that this isn't even a political party yet, right? And we're seeing this kind of flood of support for an idea, in a sense, an idea that represents resilience, that represents standing up to the establishment, right? You work with so many young people. Is that the sentiment that you're feeling as well?
In any youth movement, and I think every analyst, journalist, even political stakeholders, they really rush to generalize India's youth. That is a very hard task. And this fascination with just bundling everything as Gen Z without understanding that, there is a diversification of age that isn't just slotted between 15 and 29-year-olds, and it's actually, even the 30 to 45-year-olds, the millennials, and some people that are younger as well. Now, are there general trends that you can make up of dissatisfaction due to unemployment? Probably so, right? Can you generalize and say due to electoral wins in different aspects, satisfaction with the government on the reverse end? Probably so. But I think that the biggest casualty we make and why we're not able to understand India's youth is that we're not able to give them the credit of how that silos and pockets exist in the larger youth movement. And it most often, what I've said all the time is that they're often at odds with one another. So if you're often at odds with one another, how are you supposed to build a larger coalition? So I think we have to be careful about that, specifically the people who are covering young issues. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think this is a great point because it's something that someone like you can bring up considering you've worked with this, demographic exclusively. So, Sudhanshu, why don't you take us through what are the biggest issues that sort of plague the youth in India today from your experience? And how that maybe ties into what we're seeing with the Cockroach Janta Party as well.
If I were to go step by step, I cannot offer you these three different trends, themes, issues that young people, suffer through right now as young Indians that will be completely different, something that you haven't heard of as a journalist researching and writing on India and about Indians. What I think is actually distinct or a similarity in all those distinctions is the identity issue. And what I mean by that is, look, whether it's urban or rural, culturally, right, all across, there has always been a push for identity, an identity that was given to us or an identity that we made, right? And what you saw is we carried some identity with us. It could be the linguistic identity we have, it could be the cultural identity, it could even be a caste identity. Then there are identities that we made of ourselves because of progress in the economy, the work that we did, or were we known by what we did in society, etc. We built those identities. And what happens is naturally when you have a youth bulge, right? Just demographically, when you have 67 crore people below the age of 25, according to the 2011 censuses, right? There's always going to be limited ways that you can provide that sort of, occupation, work, education, et cetera, to everyone equally, right? And when you have the absence of that, and because of the kind of culture and heritage we have, what's your identity? If I don't have a job, let's say in rural India, I probably can't, forget providing for a family, but even getting a family. And if I don't have a family and a job, then who am I and what is my stature in India if I'm, a 35-year-old in rural India? That pushes us to go back to the identities that we always were given, my religion, my, caste, and become more passionate about that. And I think that's what I've been seeing a lot, kind of documenting and analyzing young people, both in urban and rural Indias. That's why you see people coming out in the streets in the name of caste or quotas. That's why you see people that are, taking parts of very controversial practices in their society or in their systems and defending it. I think that's been the more interesting part, is that this kind of going back to our identities and heritage that were given to us and really relying on them and making that as part of our day-to-dayness, and then standing up for it, the wrongs and the rights.
Sure. And would you say that this quest for identity also sort of made this whole cockroach bit also resonate with people?
Yeah, of course. I mean, let's look at the actual controversy. When I first heard the statement, I saw it just as like the OCAJ makes the statement, and I saw it in quotes on an article. And then I saw the 15-second version of his entire kind of statement in person through the thing. Then I saw the reaction of it, especially when, the Cockroach Janta party was kind of coming in, and you had a lot of people like, oh, this is the full context of the CGIs. And this was a 40-second clip, right? And then there was
Right.
a reversal on the 40-second clip to no, he actually said this. Here's the 4 minute. And then I ended up looking at that entire hour-long hearing to understand why he said it, what he said. And it's really funny. I mean, and you probably saw this too, is that yes, you're right that what he was saying was taken out of context. What they were really talking about in the entire aspect was a very judiciary issue, right? Both
Sure.
of the justices were really, really frustrated by the fact that, the advocate on record was pursuing something, obviously for their own personal gain and whatnot, and the need to become declared a senior advocate. And then they started kind of ranting with one another, and like the interpersonal relationships and also just the ecosystem of the judiciary, right? And that is where this stemmed from. This had nothing to do with whether it's young people or whether it's larger issues that young people face. Absolutely not. The problem here is this shows the sentiment of what our leaders have towards young people. But is this a statement on the characteristic of young people slash, a judgment on them at a larger level? Or is this just oh, these type of people, a very typical Indian uncle thing to do? And I think that's what makes this entire issue so convoluted, is that I myself, as someone who searches, researches, writes on young people all the time, is do I have an answer about how I feel about every single situation? Because to be honest, the overreaction is the only opinion that I have on this issue. And what I mean by overreaction is the overreaction by both the people, the stakeholders, both on either side of the opinion, and then obviously the government as well.
Sure. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about whether the BJP has, in a sense, got their youth demographic, which played a huge role in their coming to power in 2024. I mean, has this demographic sort of gotten disillusioned by what is being done? Do you feel like that is a sentiment that is creeping up on the BJP, or do you feel like that is not the case?
Right. So first of all, the study of youth politics in India right now, especially voter behavior pattern, is super limited. In the 5 state assembly elections that we just had, where you really saw the BJP do well. But the states that also did it, you actually, for example, Assam has the oldest average age amongst the Northeast states, right? Mizoram, Meghalaya, Nagaland, etc., all are much younger than that. So on average, Assam is in the Northeast specifically. Same thing with West Bengal, has a substantially older average demographic than most. Same thing you can say for, Kerala, for Tamil Nadu, etc. And so when you look at the actual youth proposals, some surveys will say, okay, they'll release some data, others won't, right? And when you look at the ground data of youth voter turnout and then compare it to the voter behavior turnout and etc., we just don't have enough. I mean, like, I remember this one study that everyone talks about in the 2014 election, 2019 elections, and I think the sample size was like 400 young people. And I'm like, this is the premier youth vote behavior pattern study with 400 people as your sample size of eligibly, I think around 300 million at that time were between the ages of 18 and 30, right? And so we just don't have enough data to prove if there's general satisfaction or dissatisfaction amongst young people. And anecdotally, you can come up with everything. And I could go to the next neighborhood or the next city or even forget it, the next house, and they would have something else entirely, right? So I study political communications for my doctorate here at Johns Hopkins, right? And what I look at is how government communicates with young voters. And there's a style that, I think the prime minister has really perfected, which is broadcast, right? The prime minister
Sure.
starts a scheme, he starts a narrative, and that trickles down. It trickles down from the central government, it goes to the states, it'll come down to the panchayati system. In most cases, it seems like he does really well in getting the younger base out for those campaigns. I think the government and the party is by far not just comparing it to previous Indian governments, whether it's Europe, whether it's Asia, even North America in that case too. I think this government is extraordinarily good in reaching out to young people and creating campaigns based off of that. What I think might have added to the sense of frustration is, have we actually statistically gotten younger elected officials? While the average age has technically decreased, right? But what does it matter to a young, let's say, actually Gen Z person, if the average age decreases from 56 to 54, right? That's not that big of a difference. You still have a middle aged Indian that is the age of your father, right? And then a lot of people that are the age of your grandfather, right? That are making policies and rules for representation for the largest youth demographic in the world. What I think that we haven't done that well in part of, like, let's say the government right now, is being able to really bring in more youth leaders into the government.
But Sudhanshu, just a quick point from what you said earlier. You said that we're not taking to the streets, right? Why aren't we taking to the streets? What makes that distinct from, say, what has happened in Nepal or any of the other countries where we've seen sort of youth leaders being propped up?
What reason is there, right, for us to go out on the streets? What reason is there that can unite the people in Assam, the people in Punjab, the people in Kerala, the people in Tamil Nadu? The reality is that we are a very decentralized and segmented demographic, with all of us having different priorities. A lot of those priorities are at odds at one another. I think that there's no large movement, cause, or issue that unites us. Now, look, the reality is young people protest all the time, right? We've been seeing it in West Bengal. We've been seeing it in Assam. We've been seeing it in the southern states on different issues. Now, comparing a country that is quite legitimately, I think, 75 to 100 times larger than some of the countries in our region, population wise, it's just not fair. It's unfair to say that, Bangladesh has done it, Nepal has done it, whatever. I just think that what issue is there that unites us to do that? Is there something that is just absolutely making it possible? Are there inconveniences? Sure. Are there frustrations? Absolutely. Right? The result, is not a protest that, asks for regime change. The
Right.
thing is that I have to give it to this government, is if they sense something is off, right? And it has popular support, they course correct, right? You got to give them credit for that.
Sure. And Sudhanshu, just one final question from my end, right? I wanted to ask you how you view AI manufactured sort of political movements in the future? Because it's possibly going to be really easy for people who have a hold of these tools to sort of create a movement in a sense, right? What do you view of that? Does that concern you at all?
Yeah, I mean, we've been dealing with bot accounts since social media started, right? And I think pretty much before that, we had other ways of manufactured movements in some cases. It's really interesting. If you had a chance and if you just search up Coco Janta Party, right? First of all, on Instagram, Twitter, social media, there is a different rendition of Coco Janta Party, specifically misspelled, specifically, different or org or this or that, who are just trying to take the following and the kind of just benefit off of the interest that's popped up. Look, even the origin of this specific party is based off of AI. If you looked at the original website, it is a very AI slaw. Now, nowhere in this situation has there been any talk about starting a political party, registering it with the state election commission, this, that, whatever. And I think that this is gonna, if not repetitively happen, but you're gonna have kind of movements like this pop up all the time to reflect people's identity issue and their frustration if they exist, or their satisfaction on certain issues or their preferences. I think what's really smart for us to do is to be able to be cognizant of the fact that, look, if something blows up this much, there has to be some underlying cause, emotion, uh, and in this case, dissatisfaction for people to be able to grabbing onto it. I think that what doesn't make sense to me right now, both from society and the government's perspective, is to treat it as something much larger than it already is, right? Whether it's from the opposition, or in this case, whether it's from, the ecosystem, the ruling ecosystem of saying, oh, this is all anti-national, or this is, oh, funded by this person and that individual. It's giving it so much more food and thought than it actually deserves.
But that's exactly what the government seems to have ended up doing, giving it so much more food and thought than it actually deserves. Why did a social media movement rattle the government so much? We asked exactly this to Rajat Sethi, political commentator and visiting fellow at the India Foundation. Listen in to what he said.
So that is a fascinating question. Typically, we've seen that social media phenomena do not last beyond 48 hours. They typically enter into the long tails thereafter and just fizzle out. But this was gaining traction and it was being weaponized by the opposition parties, and the opposition parties were clinging on to it to build out a counter narrative. And this narrative weaponization is what caught the government's attention. But I'm also of the view that power and the power structures and the people who are manning those seats are all going to react to such snowballing effects in a very similar way. And this is how the nature of power is, to self preserve. And therefore it came out quite abruptly. The government thought that banning it out entirely is the best way to go, instead of allowing it to become a nuisance factor in terms of the narrative, especially when India and India's economy is going through a vulnerable spot. I am usually against government clampdown on freedom of expression. Government should refrain unless and until there is extraordinary evidences that this might create social disturbances or might just upset the order. But what I am fundamentally interested in is how organic this is, because nobody has an answer to it. Is it genuinely, it has the potential of popping up into every single individual's Instagram and requesting for a follow up, and this is how the number of followers went up all the way up to 22 million? Seems unlikely, because a lot of political parties of all hues and colors, they spend a lot of money to generate this much of traction. It seems as if it is orchestrated from some sources, and there should be a deeper investigation around it.
Right. But when we speak of the rise of this entire sentiment, right, I wanted to understand from you whether you feel like a part of it is also fueled by the opposition not being able to capture the imagination of the youth as well. Apart from, of course, possible disillusionment with the BJP post the entire NEET, issue that we saw.
See, any government, be it the BJP government in its current hegemonic position, or be it the Congress when it was a hegemonic force, there is always greater than 50% people who are against the government. And therefore, if there is some form of expression of unity pouring up in social media, you will see those numbers as staggering as what we saw with the CJP accounts. Second point is that, yes, the opposition leaders across the country have not been able to capture whatever base that they own and allow them a space to actually express themselves in the way that they have been able to do right now. So this is a failure. They do not understand the language, vocabulary, lexicon of the youngsters, and this is where they have been ailing elections after elections.
Absolutely. But I want to ask you specifically about how you see the nature of dissent going forward. Are we going to see a lot more of these kinds of movements happening? And how is that going to impact, you know, behavior at the ballot box? The reason I bring this up is also because I'm from Chennai, and we have just seen in Tamil Nadu itself that very quietly you've had Gen Zers, especially, going to their parents, convincing them to vote for Vijay. And families, entire families have voted for Vijay because of that one Gen Zer in the family or two Gen Zers in the family. Is this going to impact the way politics works and campaigning works also?
So I hear what you are saying and I see some merit, and this is the reason why BJP and the central government reacted the way they did. They do not want any snowballing effect coming in, and this is why they thought that dropping a sledgehammer is the best possible outcome in the interim. Politics, real politics, is a long drawn messy game. It is not easy. In Tamil Nadu, Vijay had a strong network of fan clubs spread across the state, and some loose format of an organizational structure was there for him to convert a fanship into voter. Does any other party have it? The answer is no. Can a CJP come out and say that, okay, I'm going to build out an organization? I don't see that, especially in such a vast, diverse country. We are anti-fragile from the very definition, the very foundations of our country. So, it has to be a perfect storm for something like what happened in Tamil Nadu to happen. And BJP will also want to keep a close eye around any of these small or big social experiments being done and avoid spiraling them out of control.
Thank you so much, Rajat, for joining us on the morning brief. It was a pleasure to have you.
It was a pleasure as well, and I look forward to engaging more with your platform.
India's youth see the large economic divide that is prevalent in the country on a day-to-day basis. They want opportunities that enable upward mobility. Whether or not the CGI was referring to the youth in his oral comments, they used to being called names: lazy, jobless, and so much more. Being able to pick up on that sentiment and own it is the CJP's biggest success. The BJP is sweeping elections, so I'm not sure if this is something that will spill over to the streets and impact their performance at the ballot box. But if there's one thing I've learned from the Tamil Nadu elections, it is that one must never underestimate the power of a voter. It was the young voters and the virtual warriors who did a lot of the heavy lifting for Vijay's TVK. His supporters were often called Anil, which means squirrel in Tamil. It draws on how squirrels helped to build the bridge to Lanka in the Ramayana. The idea was that small contributions, when combined, could support a larger effort. The term Anil too was used to mock these supporters by rival parties, but we now know that didn't end up well for them. So call them what you will, squirrels or cockroaches. The young in India are aspirational. They're restless too. And maybe they're trying to say something. The question is whether political parties are truly listening. Thank you, Sudhanshu and Rajat. It's Tuesday, May 26th. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you are listening to The Morning Brief from The Economic Times. This episode was produced by Anirban Chaudhary, sound designed by Amrit Reddy. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you and have a great day.